everybody. I'm Cazmier Scored. I recently scored a 740 on the GMAT, and I'm here to share a little bit about myself and some inside tips and tricks to how that score was achievable. So a little bit about myself. I have a background in finance. I am a CFA charter holder, so I think the quantitative side of things come a little more naturally to me. I am an English native speaker. It's the only language I know. But with those few things in mind, I kind of went into the GMAT expecting it to be a little easier than anticipated. I think the CFA is framed as this glorified, quantitative, all things considered finance credential. And I went in assuming that the GMAT high school level math would kind of be a walk in the park for me. So with that in mind, I sought out to achieve a 700 plus score. It was my New Year's resolution. So on January 1st of this year, I made it an effort to focus on the GMAT, achieve my target score, did a little bit of research for what that looks like. I considered Manhattan, OG materials, target test prep, scoured Reddit and the GMAT club to kind of understand what options are out there, what options probably lend themselves best to my experiences and strengths, and focusing on the CFA charter. Their exams prep programs are these online interfaces with the readings, with the practice questions, the practice exams. And so I was looking for something kind of similar to that. Came across target test prep, a lot of favorable comments on the GMAT subreddit. So I felt that was probably a good first step to take in my GMAT studies. I asked a few people directly if they had any referrals, knew of any incoming discounts, things of that nature. And lo and behold, Target Test Prep offers a 5-day trial, which was great. Really allowed me to see the entire interface over those 5 days. So it wasn't as if anything was withheld. I could really deep dive to see what kind of resources and tools were fully at my disposal if I were to pursue kind of a full monthly subscription. So once that 5-day trial elapsed, I enrolled in a 6-month target test prep plan. I was really praying that it wouldn't be 6 months and that I would have the opportunity to maybe spend 3 months of studying, take my first exam. If I don't achieve the target score I wanted, I'd have kind of a 2.5-month buffer to kind of achieve that target score thereafter. But once I got into target test prep, the curriculum was a little slower to get through than I initially expected. I put in roughly 400 hours for each of the exams for the CFA program. And by maybe my 250th hour, I was, call it, halfway through Quant, and I had just finished sentence correction. And so I was a little deflated, a little discouraged, went back to Reddit to kind of get some more insights from peers. If I was taking things too slow, if I was maybe going too deep into the material, and people kind of all validated that this is par for the course, kind of stay true to the curriculum and things will, see favorable results come test day. And so even as kind of discouraged as I was that my timeline was getting stretched, it is what it is. I'd rather, cut once, measure twice, if that's even the correct kind of analogy there. But with all that said, stayed true to the target test prep course. Once I kind of saw the curriculum through to completion, started taking some mock exams. I did take one mock exam on, call it January 2nd. Scored a 560 baseline. Again, through my consulting friends on the subreddit, 560 is neither good nor bad, but it's all really about, one, what score are you trying to achieve? Two, do you have the bandwidth and the aptitude to kind of get there? Was neither discouraged nor encouraged by that 560, but I think as a frame of reference, getting from a 560 to a 740 is both the start and end for me. And so once I started hitting my mock exams, I scored, call it a 640 on that next one. Remember, this is now post target test prep curriculum. Understood kind of where my weak spots are, revisited specific sections that I was probably weaker in, those being geometry, permutations, combinatorics, combinatronics, things like that. And upon kind of spending a week of revision, took another mock exam, now at 670, so step in the right direction. Continued doing the same thing, revising week sections, taking a mock exam during the weekends, reviewing the mock exams on the weekends, but was supplementing my studies with the target test prep, robust question bank, GMAT club question bank, OG prep questions, really just taking advantage of the GMAT forum full service question bank. And so my mock exams went from 640, 670, I think 700. And by now I'd seen my quant score was really the only score that was improving week over week. My verbal score admittedly had kind of plateaued at this 32, 34 section. So I reached out both on the subreddit, the GMAT subreddit, and also to Target Test Prep's, I guess, customer support directly to really ask, am I missing something? How can I better tailor my studies? And Marty from Target Test Prep was really helpful in pointing me to some resources, both internal and external articles that all kind of highlight this shift in thinking for the verbal section. And so I think going into it as a native English speaker, I was just expecting, things should come naturally. I know how to think critically. I know how to read a sentence, and given my 20 plus years of speaking the language, I should be able to determine what's the best. But understanding that verbal is actually testing your ability to think sophisticatedly in itself kind of changed my mindset and the way I'm thinking through questions. And as silly as it might sound, that shift in mindset and way I'm approaching these problems helped me take my verbal score from a 32, 34 to a 40 range. Target Test Prep also maintains kind of this master data table of if your quant's here, here's where your verbal needs to be to score a certain score. And so in analyzing that, I came to the conclusion that with a 40 verbal, I would have to have a almost perfect quant. And I wanted to kind of hedge my own bets. If I don't score a perfect quant, what do I need to score in verbal? If not perfect, to kind of get the score that I desired. So I knew that there was still room to kind of improve in my verbal section. I would like to think I'd kind of locked down quant at this point. I was scoring 50s and 51s on each of the GMAT official mock exams. So just kind of stayed par for the course in my quant studies, but knew I had to change something for my verbal studies. With that said, I took to both Target Test Prep's kind of videos on YouTube where Marty, I guess, was conducting a kind of lecture series working through easy to really difficult problems and talking through common pitfalls and traps that people would fall victim to. And that really helped me to understand, how am I approaching these problems incorrectly? And just through repetition, I was able to see, okay, here are questions that are trying to trick me in a way by maybe letting me fall victim to those common pitfalls. So really, with a lot of the support of Target Test Prep, Marty's resources, both directly and also indirectly, helped me boost my verbal score tremendously. Come exam day, I took the online exam. For one reason or another, I've never taken an online exam. All of my CFA exams were in person, either in a conference hall doing writing or at a test center, taking it with Big Brother kind of looming overhead. But just due to the flexibility of the online exam, I opted for taking it at my house, kind of did all the bells and whistles to make sure my cats don't break in. There's no fire alarm testing that seems to go off monthly in my apartment complex. My Wi-Fi, bought a super extended Ethernet cord, so that way there was no kind of question if my Wi-Fi would kick out, and geared up to take the exam early before Memorial Day weekend, a U.S. holiday. My exam started off fine. The proctor was friendly, helpful. But once I started the quant section, I think was the first one I kicked it off with, my proctor asked if I could close my blinds, which is totally fair, I guess. And upon closing my blinds, because I stepped out of the frame of view, they asked me to do kind of a clean sweep of the room. So this kind of left me very disoriented. The proctor said that they would award time at the very end for the couple of minutes that I lost through all this kind of logistical stuff that for one reason or another didn't get put into place prior to hitting begin, but those few minutes were never reissued. I remember vividly I was on like the last 5 questions of my quant section, maybe had 9 or 10 minutes left. And as I'm reading these data sufficiency questions, I'm like pleading audibly out loud with the proctor to like award me even just 2 more minutes. I would like to think of myself as a fast test taker, but those of you who have taken the GMAT or gearing up to take the GMAT, every second counts, especially if you're pushing these really difficult questions that require you to think critically, not only about your understanding of the concepts, but also your application and execution of some formulas. So never was awarded those few extra minutes, but nonetheless completed my quant section. I think I came away with a 49. Carried on through verbal, integrated reasoning, and the analytical writing assessment. I believe my verbal was a 42, and so the combination of my 49 quant, 42 verbal landed me a 740, which I was totally pleased with. It flashed upon the screen because on this online proctored exam, it's just, here's your unofficial score, you click next, and you never see it again. So it's kind of one of those things that felt too good to be true. I had no confirmation or validation that that was in fact my score. I'd been reading horror stories of, people having their scores canceled, online exams, maybe misalignment of what I'm doing versus what the proctor interprets me doing. And as much as I tried to be as secure and safe as possible, those maybe intrusive thoughts crept in. And I was like, well, until this turns into an official score, I have to make sure that I take it all over again. But only a few days later did I receive an official score of my 740. Super enthused. By now, it had been late May, so had a month left of my target test prep trial, and I did a little bit of internal dialogue, consulting with more of my subreddit friends to understand if a 740 is kind of worth it given my profile, if I should try again for a higher score. And by now, between studying for the CFA for almost 3 years straight, taking a few months off to then focus on the GMAT for nearly half of a year, I thought enough was enough. And so that 740 was the exact score that I needed to kind of pump the brakes. And so that's everything about me, background in finance, took the GMAT because I want to go back to school, started with the 560, ended with the 740, took me from January 1st to around late May, in the 20th, kind of synopsize what my resources were. Each target test prep almost exclusively, at least for the information intake. And then come study crunch time where I'm just exhausting resources. I want exposure to brand new source questions. I use a GMAT club. I relied on Manhattan books. I also closely relied on maybe those last couple of weeks, the OG review and the verbal review for the 2022 calendar year. That was kind of the most up-to-date books that were made available for me. I found that target test prep curriculum and robust question bank was awesome. The reviews are super helpful in understanding, one, where am I going wrong, and the concision in their responses really helps you to stay focused in, am I thinking about this the wrong way? Am I missing a step along the way? It doesn't really revisit the specific underlying concepts, but it obviously links you to that if you need to. So for example, sentence correction modifiers were a very weak section of mine. And then eventually, through seeing that I was getting so many of these modifier questions wrong, I was able to kind of revisit that section because they're sourced in the answers and carry on from there. I talked a lot about how target test prep, the curriculum, and Marty as a direct resource was beneficial for me. I think, the really helpful part is, while it is through a computer screen, that human to human interaction certainly goes a long way, almost as if I'm, attending a professor's office hours. Marty expressed a lot of patience and understanding with me. And even though I wasn't paying for these live classes or maybe a premium subscription if they offered one, it felt like a very interpersonal relationship. He was understanding in my frustrations, having taken nearly 4 months now and not seeing the scores that I wanted, given I had set the target test prep program to a 740 plus, and my mock exams weren't breaking 740 plus. But then Marty was also there to kind of celebrate in the wins with me, which was just really an awesome feeling going through this on my own. Obviously, it's a self-paced, self-study program, and also, as is the case with a lot of people pursuing these MBAs, their employers don't always, know that they're gearing up to leave their firm. And so it's a tough process to go through if you don't have kind of that immediate support system. Obviously, my friends and family are there to support me, but they don't really understand what all of this is for sometimes. And here I am taking an exam on Memorial Day weekend while they're out, at a beach bar partying it up. But to each their own. And so it was just really rewarding, and I can't speak highly enough about the support Marty provided to me along the way. And it started with the simple, hey, can anybody help me boost my verbal score, to this customer support robot that just kind of, I guess, streamlines it to the right person. And Marty was there to kind of help me out. Personal advice, I feel like it's a dead horse. If you attend any admissions session for a graduate program, they're going to say start early in your prep. I had known for a while I wanted to apply in this 2023 cycle for matriculation in 2024. And so reverse engineering when things closed, the R1 deadlines, R2 deadlines closed, and figuring out, okay, when did I need to absolutely be done with this exam, landed me at starting in January. And again, as the months crept on, it had been April and I wasn't seeing my target score, so I didn't want to schedule my exam. I was getting more and more nervous, right? I talked to a lot of students who all set a deadline of maybe June to be done with the exam if you're applying in round one, so you can really engage in this like self-reflective process for essays and things like that. And as the weeks crept into late May, and I had my official exam set. I hadn't taken it yet, so my score hadn't really become real. I was getting more and more nervous as to, okay, am I going to fall behind on these deadlines, even though they are flexible? I trusted the advice of these students who, obviously were successful in their journeys. And so my advice would be, think about yourself, how you study best, how much time you think you might need, and almost tack on a 1.25 multiplier to it. If I could do it all over again, I'd probably start in November, so I have more downtime for the US holiday season of Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's. And then I'm already in the flow of things come the new calendar year. And even if that only provides me an extra 1 to 2 months, 4 to 6 weeks, it would have provided a lot more kind of stress, even pushing that late May test date to early April. So personal advice, start early, understand yourself, understand what it takes for you to achieve. But also, and I know this will sound very ignorant as I have scored a 740, but recognize like not everybody in the world can score, these top percentile scores. And I think in recognizing that, you can maybe focus your strengths into other things. Maybe no amount of studying will get you a marginal increase in your score, right? And kind of connecting it back to my own experience, I scored a 740. I was still hungry to score a higher score, but I didn't think that the time and energy to invest in a 10-point to 20-point bump, one, would be worthwhile on my end, but two, would actually be achievable, right? I think I exhausted all of my mental aptitude to really get that 740. And I know peers who maybe aren't the best test takers. Maybe they, struggle with data sufficiency and they're in too deep to really switch to the GRE and things of that nature. So really just make sure you're front loading all of your research and understanding so you can put your best foot forward and score the best score for you. An 800 is not achievable by everybody, and you can kind of chip that score all the way down to really evaluate. A 700 might not be achievable for everybody, and that might help you to understand, okay, how much time and energy do I need to put into this, and where do I really draw the line on studying and shifting my energy to something else, i.e. maybe your application for grad school, if that's what you're after. So again, just to summarize everything, the GMAT is behind me, which is super satisfying, but along the way, it provided a change in mindset from a test on high school level math and my ability to reason on verbal concepts that I've been practicing for my entire life. But instead, it is a test of your ability to think sophisticatedly. And if you can, if you can apply that to your studies early and often, I think you'll have much greater success. You'll be a lot more efficient in your studies. I cannot emphasize enough the importance in the verbal section. Uh, Across the board, except for sentence correction, understand what the conclusion is. If you evaluate what the conclusion is and the voice of that conclusion, critical reasoning, uh, reading comprehension all become that much easier. It's a lot easier said than done, though. It forces you to think critically and sophisticatedly much earlier than I think any curriculum will let you in on. But kind of shifting that framework will really provide success. I can't speak any more praise about Target Test Prep for their enabling of me to achieve a 740 on my score. But with all that said, thank you all. If you made it this far, cheers and good luck.